Witches are we, witches are we, witches are we on a Wednesday. Hello.
I love that.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, no jingles. Hello, Jennifer.
Can't beat a bit of ridiculousness. So, how are you today?
It's been a day. All right, I'm here.
It's been a Wednesday.
It's been a bit of a Wednesday, yes, but I'm fully present now.
Well, that's a relief. Better than being partially present, I suppose.
That wouldn't be an attractive prospect at all, really.
No,
I'm still a bit coldy, so apologies to anybody if I sound a bit nasally.
Here,
Yeah.
but nasally.
It's not the dreaded C.
I was going to say, it's not the dreaded lurky, is it?
It isn't, no. And in fact, I mean, I did do a test to make sure because, that's what you do. But apparently, you're not getting free tests anymore. Or we're not. And Alex doesn't need to test anymore for school. Oh. We did his last one this morning. So that's a change, isn't it?
It is a
He's
change,
not sure about it. He's not convinced.
Yeah. But you've never been so relieved in your life to get a flipping cold.
Well, yes, I don't get them very often, so it's like, oh well, I know it's a cold, but
yeah, exactly.
You have to make sure because you wouldn't want to inadvertently pass anything on to anyone, especially as I've been out and about quite a bit this week. So
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's better safe than sorry. But anyway, so I'm glad you're on the mend, which is good. Glad to hear that. Anyway, before we start discussing things, should we say hello to some people?
Indeedy.
I should put my spectacles on.
Your eyes on.
Really small people today. Tiny, teeny people. Hello. So we've got Jen all the way across the pond. Hello. And we've got Red Wing. Hello. Good evening.
Hello.
Stay safe. We've got Tony. Hello. Hope you're well today. We've got Chris Wibblechick. Hello, hello. And of course we've got Hans. Hello. Witches. Hello. Hope you're well. So I know what I've been up to, but I don't know what you've been up to. So what have you been up to?
Well, I always get to this point and think I haven't really done much, but I've had an incredibly busy week. Not only work-wise, but stuff going on and places I've had to be and errands to run and things to do for people, which I can't really go into on the channel. But suffice to say, it's been a bit of a Wednesday. I have been doing magical work. Usually at night time because that's the safest time to do it when I get time to myself, which is not easy. No. And I have been working quite hard, and I think that's probably why I depleted myself of a little bit of energy and picked up a cold. That's my fault. I should have. Yeah, we all do this. We all overdo.
Yeah. I know. It happens like that sometimes, doesn't it? When it's like those people that go on holiday and they've been looking for 50 weeks looking forward to go on holiday, and then one day into their holiday they come down the most horrific cold, and then spend a fortnight in a hotel. Go.
Yeah, it's a little bit like it is a little bit like that. I think I've just spread myself a bit thin in the days leading up to it, which if you're concerned about things and overthinking stuff, levels of stress, not necessarily high levels of stress, but levels of general stress and trying to do too much in a space of time do reduce your immune system, without a doubt. Certainly for me, I find that's the case. So lesson learned.
That way, yeah, and then things catch you unawares, don't they?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, I wanted to talk about where I've been because I've been off gallivanting.
Tell me more.
I've been to Glastonbury.
Oh, you're lucky bugger.
I know. Actually, I was really surprised because I did get an opportunity. I was at the occult conference, and I did get an opportunity to go out and about in town a few times, and it seems to have changed quite a bit since the last time we were there. We went there 3 years ago? Was it?
Oh, well, when we went, yes. I'm not sure that's a good thing. I know the Captain Cauldron's gone. Yeah, clearly. We know about that, but I wasn't aware of too much else. I mean, is it the energy that's changed about the place?
Yeah, the energy is slightly different, in my opinion, anyway. So I felt that the energy was slightly different. Mind you, of course, it was in the middle of that wretched storm. So any atmosphere that might have been there had been blown off, basically. blown itself off to Wales. And the conference took place even though some of the roof had been blown off the town hall, so there was an awful lot of vaccine stuff happening, and then there was various bits of the Abbey that were in previously unused parts of the Abbey where they weren't supposed to be.
Oh.
So that wasn't very good either. So yeah, there was that. So of course, because it was wet and windy and so on, there were less people around than there might otherwise have been at the weekend and so on. But yeah, and of course it's also post-COVID, and I've not been there since before COVID. Obviously, the last time I went was with you, and that was, I think, 3 years ago, wasn't it?
It was, yes, it was.
So
Gosh,
yeah, and of course, I'm sure COVID's had a part to play, but it was noticeably. It felt sort of depleted somehow. I'm not quite sure whether it really is, or whether it was just my opinion of it.
I think it's possibly that some of the shops and things that would have been open have gone under a bit because they've been so hit hard.
No, I mean, majority of the shops that you kind of come to know and love, the majority of them seem to still be in situ and still seem to be trading and so on. But I don't know, it's difficult to kind of put your finger on it really. But there was definitely less people around in the day. But again, partly I suppose it's February, partly it's it was right in the middle of Storm Eunice, who had quite a lot to do with the weekend, it has to be said. Did her damnedest to put the mockers on everything. In that, for example, I didn't manage to get there till 10 to 4 in the morning. I had planned on getting there about lunchtime on Friday. I managed to finally get there about 10 to 4 in the morning.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I think if you'd gone earlier, you'd probably been okay because everything was a little later coming in. But yeah,
it was,
at least you got there safely.
It was still sufficiently worrying at 9 in the morning where I live, because obviously it's so it's so sort of thick woodland and whatever where I am. And it was bad. There were a lot of trees down and roads blocked and stuff at my end. So it was it was quite a nightmare getting there really. Definitely didn't go on my broomstick. Went by car. Would have been blown off my broomstick.
I think yes.
I think.
It's a bit,
and of course, if not,
and
everybody wants to blow off.
Indeed, no.
Certainly not on your broomstick. No. So yeah, but I must tell you about this conference because it was jolly good.
Well, yes, worth the trip.
It was worth the trip actually, and there were a couple of speakers that were worth all the effort purely for for getting down there and getting back again in their own right, let alone the other speakers that were there as well. And I thoroughly enjoyed the entire weekend. So I shall tell you who was on and what they talked about. If you're interested, pin back those ears.
I am interested, but if you hear rustling in the background, somewhere in the depths of my death pile of stock, there's a cat. So that's why I'm thinking, what is that noise?
Okay, so we've got rustly cat syndrome going on behind you. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, just to let people know.
Before I do, hang on a minute, what we got here? Red Wing says the last time they were there was in 1974. Crikey, that was a while ago.
Wow.
Yeah,
but it was different then.
Yeah, I'll bet it was too. Hans says blowing off Becky. Well, thank you very much. just to be reminded. Tony says I had some wind magic here. It made some cladding on my house disappear. That's not great, is it? And off it went with that. Yeah.
Exactly. I've never been so happy that we got our roof fixed about a week before the storm started.
Yeah,
so,
that was lucky, wasn't it? Very lucky. So our very first talk, we had opening at 9 in the morning, 9:30 in the morning. And obviously you could sign up for various workshops that were running. So there were workshops, single workshops and talks running parallel, side by side. So you could go to one or the other. If you wanted to go into a talk, you had to sign yourself in because obviously there were limited spaces. But for the that was for the workshops, but obviously for the talks, it was any number of people could be in the talks. So after sort of opening and welcome, we had an hour of Ron Hutton.
Oh, I do like the Ronald. He's absolutely marvellous. I could listen to him for hours. And
I'll tell you what else was really nice, and that was that his wife, whose name escapes me at the moment. Oh, I can't remember her name. Anyway, she did readings throughout as well, which was brilliant. And the talk that he gave was on goddesses of sex and violence. Well, that's a bit of a crowd drawer for a start, isn't it?
I mean, you're guaranteed bums on seats with a title like that.
And bums on seats there were. And it was brilliant. And actually, rather than lots and lots of different goddesses, it was the theme of one main goddess, right from sort of day dot, basically. And it was how she changed her name as she went through, as she was adopted through various different cultures.
Where they kind of just take over and move her on a bit. Yeah,
exactly. Started as Brain's Gone Dead.
Wasn't it Inanna?
Inanna. No, before Inanna. No. Anyway, Brain's Gone Dead. And obviously then went on to Ishtar and all sorts. So yeah, but it was fascinating, and it was this whole sort of thing. And as I say, with various readings taken from hundreds, thousands of years ago that his wife did, and she sort of put lots and lots of characterization into the readings, and it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Wow. So enjoyed that immensely. I could have listened to that for a good 2 or 3 hours. Actually, it was really good. So talking of the storm, Redwing was Squiffy on Scrumpy in 1974. That is the only way to be on Scrumpy, I think you'll find.
And 1974, obviously a very fine year for it.
Yes.
I'm not going to ask whether you were legally allowed to drink at that point.
Yeah, no, I don't think I was quite old enough at that point. Tempted, but not old enough. I think that's probably the best way of talking about that. Chris says that they had a tree down at her flat. Unfortunately, no one was injured. And I did notice that on Facebook she put that instead of sawdust being on her washing today, she liked to think of it as tree sparkles. I quite like that.
Tree sparkles.
Tree sparkles. It's how you look at things, isn't it? Yeah,
Tree
definitely.
glitter.
Tree glitter, that's it. Loose tiles and flattened fence guttering is hanging. Tree now removed. I've renamed sawdust tree glitter. There we go. I hope all is sorted.
Yeah.
So could have been worse. There's a lot of people saying the same thing. Could have been much, much worse, all things considered. So after we had Ron, we had a break, which was jolly good. And after the break, which was obviously coffee time, especially having had about 2 hours sleep from arriving in Glastonbury at like 24 in the morning, we then had the choice of either David Rankin talking on the Kabbalah before the Tree of Life, or Trevor Jones talking about magical gardening. So I plumped for the magical gardening.
Magical gardening.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's difficult when you've got things that you do want. I mean, this is always the thing, isn't it? You want to attend more than one, and you can only physically be. We've not perfected the art of being in 2 places at once.
Yeah, exactly. So we plumped for Trevor's magical gardening, and for the majority of time he talked about the worts, such as sort of mugwort and so on. So that was interesting, and for me there was a lot of talk on the actual gardening of it rather than the plant itself, which of course is exactly what it says on the tin, and sort of best ways of growing it, whether it's from seed or whether it's from cutting and so on and so forth. So it was interesting, really was interesting. There was sort of lots of snippets of information there. Sort of like you need a big pot for this and you need that for so and so, and it's a real practical gardening thing.
Yeah. Because if you want these herbs, so you can't all just shove them in a pot of seeds and hope that it'll happen. Some things are really hard to grow from seed, but some things take incredibly well from a softwood cutting or even a hardwood cutting. Something like rosemary, for example, is actually is so much easier to grow from a cutting than from seed, for sure.
Yeah. So it was good. So it was, very much a practical gardening lesson, but it was good, specifically, and obviously, so many magical plants that are out there. But it was interesting because it was from a practical point of view rather than from this plant does this and this plant does that. It wasn't about the plants themselves. It was about actually caring for them and gardening them and looking after them, because they've got 5 acres or so. So they've got plenty of room to do their gardening in.
He's always got jobs, hasn't he?
Exactly, yeah. It just doesn't stop, really. So, Anyway, so that was that. And then, miraculously, it was time for lunch.
Andy, I bet you needed some food by that point.
Oh, yes, very much so. Well, the crumpets that we'd had first thing in the morning had definitely run down at that point.
Well, you are a many crumpet a day person. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You can't get enough crumpet. That's what
Oh God, here we carry on crumpets.
Carry on witching. Oh dear, I digress. I digress. So yes, it was pasty time.
Oh yes.
So off down to the baker's we trundled and found vegan pasties. Oh my God, they were to die for. They really, really were. So yes, they were nice. Sadly, on Sunday they'd already sold out of all the vegan pasties by the time we managed to arrive. Obviously, word had got about, and people had got their orders in early.
Were there any other good vegan offerings though?
Yeah, vegan sausage roll, not bad, pretty good,
not as
but
good,
not
as the
quite
pasty.
as good as the pasty. No,
Clearly, word had spread.
Definitely word had spread. Yeah. See, when you find things like that, you have to keep quiet. That's what I find. Anyway.
Yeah, don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anybody. They'll all want one.
Nothing.
Yeah, it's that whole waiter, there's a fly in my soup thing, isn't it? Yeah. Then, unfortunately, after lunch, we had a bit of a blip in the conference, in that there was a couple of speakers that should have been there, and because of the storm, weren't able to get there because they were relying on trains and
oh dear, no, never a good idea.
Various other methods of transport. So unfortunately, there were there were a couple of speakers that weren't able to make it. So we had the first talk actually was the tour guide of the Glastonbury Abbey, who talked partly about Glastonbury Abbey, but he also talked about the Jubilee celebrations that are coming up that coincided with the Jubilee celebrations of 1922. And there's various parades and lots of interesting and influential people, some of which were of the Golden Dawn and stuff, that were down there, and they're all on film. Apparently you can find them on the internet, the actual the actual footage of this thing from 1922, this pageant basically. So he talked about that, and that was interesting. It was. The only thing that I would say about that was that because he didn't receive any kind of introduction and you just stood up and started talking, you sort of felt that you were thrown in at the deep end and weren't entirely sure what he was talking about and where it was going. And it took a good sort of 10 minutes to catch up. It's like,
it's kind of like, oh, okay, what is this?
And what is he? Who's that?
It was
interesting, very knowledgeable guy. I just think probably he doesn't know about the Abbey isn't worth knowing, I'm sure. But obviously, sometimes when people like that talk and they're talking to mere mortals, then you kind of get a bit lost at the beginning. So so if you'd been introduced, I would have been a little bit wiser as to where the starting point was. It took me a while to catch up.
Fair enough.
So so that was that. And then after that, again, the person that should have been the speaker after that unfortunately wasn't able to make it. So we had half an hour or so of Liz and Trevor talking about when they had the Cat and Cauldron. Which was really
I've got their books because they are brilliant.
Exactly, yeah. So it's the Tales of the Witchcraft Shop, isn't it? So we had bits of that, which was entertaining and amusing. And then after that, there was a panel, and it was sort of like question time, really. Like sometimes they do that at Druid Camp, don't they? Yeah. And so so it was a similar sort of thing. It was a sort of a question time. Anyone wanted to ask any questions, could put any questions to the panel and that kind of stuff. So actually, at that moment in time, we felt that coffee was actually needed, so we went out and found coffee. So that was the thing. We didn't have any burning questions, so we disappeared off and found coffee. And the reason that we weren't in one of the workshops was because it was the Celtic Mysteries. And we were going to be listening to the talk about Celtic Mysteries a bit later on, and it was a 2-hour workshop, so we hadn't signed up for that. Because we thought, well, it's a longer one. But that's how it was. Anyway, the end of the day saw either a wild clay workshop, but apparently had a piece of paper, but apparently there was no clay, so didn't sign up for that.
That's a bit unfortunate. I'm sorry. I love it. It's a clay. I think
there might have been a story as to why the wild clay was missing.
It was furious and it had gone off in a huff and slammed the door. I'm sorry, it's just my man being.
So
Oh,
I'm sure there was a veritable explanation as to where it was.
I'm sure there was a proper explanation.
But they didn't see fit to tell me. Anyway.
How very rude.
Anyway, so that end, we decided that making Irish magic, W.B. Yeats and the Celtic Order was for us. So in the absence of Clay, that's what we sat and listened to. And that was really interesting, actually. And it was basically, it was the, partly it was the life story of W.B. Yeats and the Celtic Order that he instigated, and it kind of ran parallel with the Golden Dawn. Really interesting, actually.
Ooh,
It was interesting.
That, yes.
So so that was that, and then more crumpets were needed after that. So back to the old hotel room we went.
The crumpets.
Crumpets. And then obviously, had some food and so on, like you do, because when it's tea time, you've got to have some tea. So so that was
food orientated.
Well, yes, I know. It's that sort of time of day, really, isn't it? And then Sunday saw even more interesting things. So here we go. This is Sunday's offerings. So first thing in the morning. Oh, also bought some interesting bits and pieces. I had a bookstore there. I had a small marketplace there this year. It wasn't as big as it has been in previous years.
Well, I guess a lot of people didn't make it, yeah.
But there were, there were some new books. There were some second-hand books. There was a store that had lots of lotions and potions, for want of a better word, lots of aromatherapy style things, but also magical aromatherapy sprays and oils and things like that, which was lovely. Spent quite a lot of money there. So that was good. They had some forged iron goods, hand-forged iron goods, which were
I'd like to forge iron, actually. I was one of those things I'd quite like to do, and occasionally
I'd quite like to do that.
I think that's something that may have to happen at some point.
Yeah. Jen says, was Maud Gonne involved in the Celtic Order? Yes, I believe she was. That's a name that's familiar. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, she was involved with W.B. Yeats. And she was involved for a bit, but I think if I remember rightly, she stormed off in a huff and said it was too much like the Golden Dawn.
Yeah.
Those lines.
Was it all a bit blokey, was it?
I'm not sure. I think there was an awful lot of yes, this is great. Yes, this is great. Well, actually, I'm not so sure. I think there seemed to be a fair amount of that.
Fair enough.
So yeah. Trying to think what else there was on offer. The normal sort of, well, no, actually there wasn't the normal sort of paraphernalia that you might get at some of these events, because there was a genuine human arm bone there with a hand attached to it.
Oh,
nice to get back to normal, as some people say.
Yes, exactly. Oh dear.
You might want that warning your thing.
When you've been to lots of these sorts of things, you kind of you know you do know is going to be the same. There's a certain
Well, what was nice about it was that a lot of these things you sort of get the lighter sort of fluffy things, and you get the Nemesis Now stuff, and you get all of that kind of stuff, but you don't get that at the occult conference. You don't get all of that stuff.
No, because
which is not, quite nice.
I was thinking more like Witch Fest or Shop Fest.
Exactly, and things like that. You don't. Yeah, you just don't.
Yeah.
But,
it's a different market it's catering for. I think that's the thing.
Definitely. So a bit more, in some people's view, a bit more sinister. Some people's view, a bit more authentic.
A bit more serious.
A bit more serious. So Anyway, so on Sunday, after more crumpets, it took quite a long time to eat crumpets on Sunday morning, which meant that we missed the first talk. Didn't wake up quite as quickly as we'd hoped to. So the first talk was Colin Wilson and Robert Graves, Bioenergetic Power Transfer by Osmosis, or the Bohemian Stars, and had planned on going to the workshop of the Bohemian Stars rather than the talk, but as I say, didn't make it in time, which was a bit of a shame. So by the time we turned up, we were in the workshop for the Grimoire Practice Primer, and that was David Rankin. So
Oh,
that was interesting. And
yeah,
what
it's
was
good
even
to-
more interesting was that I'd gone to the Nameless Art Conference in Essex a couple of years ago. And what was interesting was that when my notebook, interestingly, it fell open on the page of notes that I'd made on the previous thing that I'd been to with David Rankin that day. That was quite interesting.
yeah.
So yeah, and that was good, and it was very much about the actual practice of some of the grimoire magic that he's performed over the last 38 years. Whereas the previous talk that I'd been to at the Nameless Art, that was very much more about the grimoire magic itself and about the grimoires that he'd gleaned a lot of the information. He's got a new book coming out.
Yeah, I'm not
And
too
so it was more
familiar.
about his actual practice.
Yeah.
You know, with sort of some anecdotes and things of, you know, certain
What have
situations
worked and
that
what
he'd found,
haven't.
yeah, and certain workings and stuff, and you know, who might have turned up as, you know, part of his invocation or evocation.
Yes,
So that was interesting, rather than it being about the books that he'd used in order to compile this book that he's got being.
But again, at a deeper level, really, they
So
seem to
again,
have
different level. Yeah, different level. So that was interesting. And then after lunch was the thing that I'd been looking forward to most of all for the entire weekend, which was the talk by John Constable, who's also known as John Crow, on goose and crow magic.
Oh, now I am jealous.
And it's amazing, and it's not what you think it is, because he, as I say, his alter ego is John Crow. So he's a playwright, poet, performer, and his alter ego is John Crow. As I say, his real name's John Constable. But the goose is not the goose. The goose refers to backstory. So he got involved with Crossbones Cemetery.
I thought it was them, yeah.
Yeah. So he got involved with Crossbones Cemetery up in Southwark. And he journeyed, and he's mostly shamanistic, I'd say. And he had journeyed and got in touch with, for want of a better description, a person that had been part of the Winchester Geese. And for anyone that doesn't know who the Winchester Geese are, they are the women that worked in the brothels in that area that were licensed by the Bishop of Winchester. And they were known as the Winchester Geese. And this person that he's channeled, essentially, he refers to her as the goose. And she's she's very much not the victim. She's the protector of other people that had worked in those situations too. And it was fascinating. And he did lots of performance in his talk. You know, there was a lot of performance art going on there, and stuff that he had written, stuff that he channeled, and stuff that was, you know, just plain fact about the graveyard itself. You know, how it came about to be discovered and how it came about to be saved. And it's still owned by Transport for London, but it's got a preservation order that nothing can ever be built on it. Everything's built around it, but nothing can be actually built on it. And so he sort of has done for 23 years, did this this monthly vigil up there, and obviously has devised rituals and so on that went along with them, and anybody could turn up. And they're still going on, even though he's not now any longer any part of that, because he's now moved to Glastonbury with his partner. It's still continuing, and they're still sort of using the rituals that they were doing then, and
Still
so
very
on.
active.
Yeah, exactly. And it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And then after that, there was another talk, and I'll come back to that. But at the end of the conference, the final thing was this ritual that he put on for to do the goose and crow magic. And I can honestly say it was one of the best rituals I've ever attended. It was amazing.
Wow.
Absolutely amazing. It was moving. It was well done. It was just incredible. It really, really was. Yeah, and it was sort of, you know, to include any of the outcasts of society. You know, and of course there's been lots of petitions and stuff to have these people that were buried in this graveyard. Obviously they weren't buried in consecrated ground, and that's hence the outcry of the place itself, because obviously it would have meant a lot to the people at the time not buried in consecrated ground. Obviously it's less of an issue these days, isn't it? But in days gone by it meant
it was the thing.
Well, I mean, it was a big thing, wasn't it? And you sort of, were told that you were going to have a dam sold and all sorts of stuff.
Oh God, yes.
And so that was the thing. So it sort of celebrated and joined anybody that, past and present, was classed as an outcast, if you like. So it was really, really moving. Actually, I loved it. It was excellent. Can't speak highly enough of it. He had a book on sale as well, and it was called a couple of books actually. One of which was called The Southwark Mysteries, and that has part of the play that he wrote that was performed at the Globe Theatre, Shakespeare's Globe. So that's in there, and sort of some of the poems and stuff that he's got from channeling the goose. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. It really was, and it was so heartfelt, moving. It was brilliant, truly brilliant. Loved it, absolutely loved it. So I really enjoyed that, as I say. And I think, yes, I enjoyed Ron and his talk. Really enjoyed Ron's talk, but I have to say, the thing with John Crow, both the talk and the workshop, blew the socks off everything else for me. That was the highlight of my weekend, and it was worth all the trouble getting there and blooming getting back, I might add, because that wasn't easy either.
No.
It made every single second of that nightmare of travelling worth it. Really did.
Wow.
It was brilliant. So and the one other thing that was a talk was by Liz Williams, and of course, she's brilliant, of course, anyway, isn't she?
Absolutely.
And she did a talk about Dennis Wheatley.
Ooh.
And that was interesting as well. And of course, the end part of that was interesting because it was talking about, basically that he was a product of his time and so on. So of course, you've got stuff in there that's very sexist and rather racist and misogynistic and so on. But he was an amazing sex, and he was also really, really lucky. He just managed to sort of fall into his niche and start selling shed loads of books in one go. He obviously knew how to hit the market and hit the market running, literally, and off he went. So she talked about his links with Aleister Crowley and how he kind of was like, but no, not my cup of tea, but I'll write about it.
Well, that's the thing, it's obviously had enough drama in it.
Exactly, so and of course that was one of my entry points with the occult, to be honest, because
Wheatley.
Good old Dennis Wheatley. Other kids are reading Janet and John, and I was knee deep in so
those were the books that were around, weren't they?
Exactly.
When we were growing up, if somebody had those about, and they were always considered to be a bit
exactly. I used to get them out of the library. I used to spend an inordinate amount of time at the library when I was small, and so when I was 7 or 8, that's what I was getting out of the library. So so that was my thing. So what a conference.
Amazing.
It was. And it was all topped off with a rather splendid Indian meal at the end. You know that place that we went to last time?
Oh, yes.
Remember? We went there. Yeah. It was lovely, actually.
Was
really good.
Very good food.
Good. We'd been turned away the night before because it was completely packed.
Yes.
So the following day turned up just after 5 o'clock and said, "You're not packed now. Can we sit down?"
Feed me.
feed me now, Seymour. So and feed us they did. Very nice it was too. So it was good. So obviously magic happened that day, but magic happens most days in my world, to be honest. So just trying to think what other bits of magic I've been up to. What else have I been up to? Oh, I did something I've not done before yesterday, magically.
Ooh, okay.
And I journeyed to a former illness.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was really interesting. And it's not something that I've ever done before. I've never even thought about doing that before. But yeah, and it's like, okay, you tried to polish me off before, and there's threat of you returning. So what haven't I learnt?
And was it enlightening? Sounds like
Yeah,
it may
it was
have
actually.
provided.
It was. And it was quite an interesting thing to sort of like, you know, search for it. And it's like, okay, just sit with it for a bit and you're still there. So what haven't I learnt? What haven't I done? What haven't I done I'm supposed to have done that you let me off for before? So that was kind of the sentiment, really. And
Yeah.
so I got an answer. It's like, oh, okay, I'll get on with it then.
Clarity is a good thing. If you get a clear answer to something, then very much so.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's difficult when you're caught up in just ongoing stuff to actually stand back and do that. But it is that thing. If you've got a very strong body-mind connection, as I know you and I both have, and many other people do, you know there's a message in there. You know there's something that's supposed to. There's a point to it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Which sounds odd to people. They're like, well, isn't being ill just being ill and an inconvenience? Like, no, there is something that I need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
That may resolve it, or may mean it doesn't have to follow a worst case scenario conclusion.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, it's difficult because, you know, it's not the sort of thing you can say to many other people, because that sounds terribly like, oh, well, therefore you're responsible for your own illness. It's not quite that. It really isn't, because that's not helpful.
No.
But learning the lessons from it afterwards can be most useful.
Yeah, definitely, especially if it recurs. And that was the thing. It's like, okay, well, you're threatening to come back, so okay, let's have a chat then. So yeah, that was interesting. I've not done that before. You know, when it comes to sort of self-healing or self-diagnostics and things like that, and you can kind of travel to what the ailment is, but in the same way that you know, you could use a power animal. What's the message in this? Or a spirit? What's the message in that? It was actually travelling to
just going direct.
Yeah, direct. What are you telling me?
Yeah,
so yeah, that was really
I tend to do direct. I recognise that. I don't tend to use what's our third party, because that's not quite the right phrase, but to actually go and look at that part of your body, especially if it's something that you've tended to shove to one side because you're like, I can't deal with that now, or I don't want to look at it, I don't want to acknowledge it. And of course it just becomes more insistent then. It's like, no, you have to look at this. So that was interesting, as I say, and it's not something that I've done before. You know, it's like self-healing, as I said, you know, self-healing, yes, done that in various aspects, but it was just a different way of tackling something. It's like, you know, why is this possibility back? Rather than trying to fix it, to actually get to the root of what might be bringing this on. Why has it come back now? Why not a year ago or a year in the future? What is happening now that I need to address? Not very hard work to do, I'm sure.
But it was an interesting exercise to do, and obviously, you know, be something that'd be worth doing several times to see, you know, do I still get the same answer? Is it you know, is it only part of a message that I've picked up? Because like you say, it's hard work, and it's, you know, have I only listened to some of it? Have I listened to all of it? Is there more that is to come, or is there a twist on it, or whatever? But
or have you just heard what you wanted to hear and then decided to discount the rest?
Oh, that'll do. Thank you very much.
That's enough now.
Thank you.
That's true, though, isn't it?
But yeah, so that was an interesting thing. As I said, I've not really done that before. I haven't done that before. So that was an interesting exercise to do. So yeah, so we'll see with that. That'd be interesting. Anyway, there's work to do. Things afoot.
Yes. Things afoot. It's not necessarily to do with the feet, but things afoot. Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah. No, that is listening to your body rather than trying to make it be what you want it to be, or make it be better, or make it be, you know, which there's a time and a place for that kind of magic, absolutely. But yeah, the kind of forensic digging down to find out what's going on. Absolutely, really important.
So that was an interesting exercise, definitely. So a bit more of that to come, I think. But so I've got a starting point, if nothing else. So that's quite good. I'm quite pleased about that. So Yeah. Does more fire magic, of course, but I mean, fire magic is fire magic. Fire and wind, to be fair, because the wind kind of invited itself anyway.
It
I rather
certainly
like a
did,
bit of
like an
wind when it's
unwanted
magic.
guest.
Outside magic with a bit of wind, it just adds a bit of drama, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it certainly adds
We'll
a bit
just
of
do this. Well, there,
theatricality.
see, look at that.
Bang.
Not so good if you're trying to light something. I'm like, but yeah.
But make sure you're upwind, not downwind. I think that's fair to say. Especially with long hair like this.
Exactly. Yes. That's not quite a thing. So yeah. Right. We have some people making comments here.
Yes, Chris is asking.
Yes. What have we got? So yes. So Jen says yes. Thanks, Hans. I assume she was. To my reading, she seemed very much an instigator in Yeats' interest in the Celts. Yes, I believe she was thinking about because obviously there's so much information over a weekend. You sort of try and pick out bits that you've absorbed and bits that have got lodged elsewhere. So yes, yeah, encourager might be a better word. She says, yeah, definitely. Hans says John Crow's amazing. Yes, and the rituals are on the 23rd of each month. Thank you for that. Yes, they are. Is John Crow the crow who was involved with Buster Nolan and Rollo Morphling? I don't know. Norfolk Sea Henge. I don't know, actually, Chris. Might be. But I can't say for sure yes or no. He's quite an activist, I would say, but that wasn't discussed at all. So I would be going out on a limb to say either way there. All I can say is that on Facebook, I found him on Facebook subsequently, and he specifies about Crossbones Cemetery, but I didn't notice anything about the Norfolk Sea Henge, in any of the blurb that I read on his profile. So that's not that I say that I'm a stalker. I just was looking to see if I had the right one. But yeah, so I didn't notice anything come up about that. But that's not to say that it isn't him. So yeah, I honestly can't comment on that. Fascinating person though, definitely worth a look. And obviously you can find out lots of information on the Crossbones website, which is .org.uk. I think crossbones.org.uk. I think, if memory serves. But yeah, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I loved it, really did. It was such a good conference. It always is. The only criticism I'd have had was that normally they have tea and coffee facilities in their little kitchenette bit, and that wasn't there this year. So if you wanted refreshments, you had to go traipsing up the town, and of course it was very wet and very, very windy, which meant that it was a bit less convenient than it might otherwise have been. I mean, there's cafes just opposite, to be fair. It's not far to go, but it's much easier to just pop into the on-site canteen, basically sit down with a cup of tea and then go back in again. But I think because there were issues with the town hall roof, I think people were otherwise engaged, to be fair. So it would have been a little bit nicer to have had that facility, but it wasn't the end of the world. It was there, and I know that they're going to be readdressing that for next year and subsequent conferences to basically bring that back. I don't know whether they thought it was not viable to have it, but I think lots of people have said the same thing, that it was better to have it than not. And so
because if you're going from one workshop to another, you don't really want to have to completely leave the premises and risk missing the start of the next talk.
Exactly, especially if you end up having to queue for whatever reason. One of the for example, because of COVID, the bakery, the one that did the amazing pasties, were only allowing 2 people in the shop at any one time. So again, you end up having to queue, and obviously there's a time delay between one customer leaving and the next one twigging that it's their turn to go in. So you've got a bit of a time delay there, and so on. And of course that means that it takes slightly longer to get whatever, rather than having it on site with teas and coffees pretty much already done, But it's not the end of the world, It's just a small
annoyance.
Small observation, exactly. So Chris says they have a ceremony each year at Crossbones. They have a ceremony each month as well. So I don't know whether I've not explained very well, or whether this is an additional thing that you're talking about, Chris. But yeah, they have a ceremony each month on the 23rd of each month, which is this sort of ritual thing. But the Unclaimed Dead, fascinating story. The conference sounds incredible. Yes, it was. The Unclaimed Dead, I don't know whether that's an additional annual thing or whether that's part of their monthly thing. I think they do an additional.
It might be to do with Samhain, possibly. Maybe having something.
Yeah, maybe they do that as well. I think
Yeah.
actually that rings a bell.
Yeah, it does vaguely with me.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, they, as I say, so they have these vigils, these ritual vigil things on the 23rd of every month, and have done for the last, well, it's 25 years now, because they did it for 23 years, and then it's his number is 23, everything's 23. So, yeah. No, it was fascinating, actually. I loved it. It was so good. And he spoke so eloquently and passionately. Yeah, you couldn't help but be moved. It was really lovely. And, we had ribbons. So he had, obviously, this is a room in the town hall, nothing like Crossbones Cemetery, but he'd had a sort of constructed things that represented the bars that go around the outside of the ceremony, where there's already lots and lots of ribbons tied. You can go at any time and tie ribbons, and lots of people do. And so they constructed this small bit, and then all of us were given ribbons, and we sort of like said these words. We were chanting and chanting and chanting these words, and putting our own energy into these ribbons with these words we were chanting. And then we all went up one by one and tied our ribbons onto these mock bars, if you like. And we'd all put an item that represented us to be in the room on the altar, and it was lovely. Absolutely lovely. Really was. So, yeah, it was good. Very moving. Excuse me for moving. So, yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, if you get an opportunity, anybody, if you get an opportunity and come across him, be part of anything that he's organising, I would recommend it highly, actually.
Yeah, sounds like not to be missed.
Yeah, definitely. So, so 100 or so books later, we came back again. It wasn't quite that many, but maybe 20 odd. So yes, quite a few books, but plenty of material, plenty of stuff to sink your teeth into. And
books are addictive, aren't they?
They rather are, aren't they? Yeah, I know. You sort of think, well, sometimes it's just a different slant on something that you already have an interest in, or it might be an entire new outlook on something, or an entirely new topic about something, but there's always something new to read and to learn, isn't it? Every day's a school day. There's always something.
It's never all done. No,
I love it. I do. So yes, came back with quite a few bits and pieces. Came back with less crumpets but more books. I think that's the best way of putting it.
And considerably fewer pounds and pence.
I didn't buy any jewellery though.
Wow. Okay, that's progress.
I know. Didn't buy any jewellery. Very good. Nearly, but I didn't.
It was a close run thing, was it?
It was. There were several. I'm like, I could do it. No. So yeah, it was a close run thing a couple of times, but yeah, it was good. It was nice going around Glastonbury though, and sort of seeing the old shops and things, and but it was surprising how it had changed, and I can't quite put my finger on how it had changed. And so the only thing I can really think of is that it was much emptier than usual. I mean, I've been there during the winter before. Obviously, I've been to
some atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to the occult conference several times before, so I've been there.
It's always at the same time, isn't it? Same time of year.
It's always in February, so I've always been there, but I've been there several times before. I think that was the fourth time I've been. Might have been the fifth time I've been. Anyway, so I've been several times. So obviously I've seen Glastonbury in February before, and it was just so comparatively quiet. I think that was the thing, but it really was a horrific storm. And on the way back, we were lucky; we got delayed by about 20 minutes or so leaving. Had this strange delay, which meant that we ended up leaving about 20 minutes after when we should have done. And it was really lucky that we did, because this tree had come down on our road that we needed to use about 20 minutes earlier. And the weird thing was that Saturday night, I just nodded off to sleep, had one of my dreams, which was the tree going whack in this road. And I didn't know where this road was. I was like, blimey, where's that? Bearing in mind, I'd driven on the Friday through all these trees everywhere. And I just, as I went to sleep, I saw this tree coming down, and it was that tree, but it had come down 20 minutes. It would have been the time that we should have left. So, yeah, so that was good. So obviously they got saved there.
Yeah, meant to be delayed.
But yeah, but it didn't half wake me up with a start when I had the dream. It was like, it was like, oh, tree. And yeah, you know, went over this railway crossing, and then there was this tree. It's like, oh, okay, go the long way round then.
Yeah, quick turn around reverse.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, ended up having to go the other way round, which meant an awful lot more country lanes rather than sort of like short, sharp shock. Lots more country lanes, lots more potential trees falling, and of course it'd been wet at that point, so they were that much looser.
Yeah. Isn't it?
Yeah, but it was carnage, really was.
Yeah, southwest.
There you go. I think. Did you have much damage in your garden?
No,
nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
I suppose by the time it got over to you, it had blown itself out somewhat.
Well, I think the thing is, where we are, my back garden is actually very sheltered because it's kind of slightly down a bit.
Oh,
so
it is,
kind of, the trees were kind of going mad, and I kept thinking, I wonder if one of those is going to go over. But it kind of missed our garden. We ended up with an awful lot of someone else's rubbish in our garden.
Oh,
Not
did you?
quite sure how that happened. Bits of polystyrene. Obviously, someone had put them out for recycling or was doing something, and they all ended up in my garden. had to be disposed of appropriately, but you know, I mean, the cats stayed indoors because they didn't fancy the wind up their tails.
No.
But actually, I mean, there were trees down. I tried not to go out that day. I was trying to think. I did have to go out because I had to take a friend to hospital for an appointment. So we did go out, and that was in the afternoon, and that was a little bit hairy because obviously my van is a bit taller than the average car, so you tend to get sort of buffeted. But it was fine. It was all right. But yeah, I mean, there are places up here that didn't have power for a long time and all that. But where I am, we just sort of got away with it. But in the run up to all these storms, I was trying to do the clues in the name. I was trying to do as much as I could to put protection over the country as a whole, and then certain areas where I knew people were going to be, and around here as well, and it sort of worked to a degree. But you know, you're faced with a humding of a storm. It's very small fry what you can do, but you just do what you can really, and try and hope that. I think it could have been a lot worse, and a lot more people could have been very badly injured. And I think, or worse, and they weren't. So yeah. We have to look on it as a reasonable success.
Yes, I think there were very limited casualties actually. But again, you know, when you get plenty of warning like that, it does help, doesn't it?
Oh my God!
What?
Chris's comment here: the most interesting storm/wind event. Chapel doors blowing open at my friend's funeral on Monday, and the flowers lifting off the coffin. Lots of screams.
I'll bet.
Man.
I'll bet. Oh my God, can you imagine?
Spooky looking.
I want that to happen at my funeral. What's going on with my hair? I want that to happen at my funeral.
Yes, I just think that the perfect thing would be a great loud raspberry noise in the background.
Well, the phantom raspberry blower of old London.
Yeah, of old London.
Can you imagine those? Like as it's all, wow, levitating wreaths on your coffin. Excellent. I like that, Chris. Thank you for sharing that. Oh dear.
Oh.
Yeah. So Jen says we caught the wind in California, but it's light compared to what happened there. Yeah, it really was something else here. And thank you for the warning too. I appreciate that very much. And Chris says she would have loved it. Excellent.
Well, there you go.
What a way to go. It's exiting with a bang. Or a scream.
Whoosh.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And then referring back to the crossbones thing, Chris says, thinks it's an additional. My memory of what I've read is letting me down. Yeah, it's annoying when that happens, isn't it? You sort of think, yeah, that's definitely that, or is it?
Yeah. Have I misremembered, or did I just dream that? That's my usual thing.
Yeah.
So did I dream that?
Yeah. Strange, isn't it? I don't know. Well, on that wind note and flowers lifting off coffins, I think that's probably a perfect
Can't really follow
place.
that.
Can't follow that. Definitely can't follow that. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for coming and listening. Anyone that hasn't already been said hello to and is watching back, hello to you too. And goodbye from both of us. Heather, do the awkward wave.
Here we go then. Woo. The windy wave.
The windy